Hello, ladies and gentlemen. The ever-changing situation on the Korean Peninsula ran into a new twist this week, with North Korea coming up with a sudden peace offensive in nuclear concessions as South Korea conducted its highly profiled naval drill near Yeonpyeong Island. Join us for an expert dissection of the situation after the newsreel.
On the 20th of December, the South Korean Army held military exercise in the West Sea near Yeonpyeong Island, where the fatal North Korean shelling took place last month. The drill received international attention due to North Korea's hardline threats issued against it, and Russia even called an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council to press for its cancellation. On the same day, North Korea reportedly made a promise to U.S. Governor Bill Richardson to allow IAEA inspectors back into its Yongbyon nuclear facilities and sell its spent nuclear fuel rods abroad. This surprise concession came an hour before the drill, which ended without further North Korean provocation. The White House commented on North Korea's sudden peace offensive during a scheduled press briefing by saying that North Korea has to show sincerity and that the IAEA inspection is a matter for direct discussion with the organization itself. Meanwhile, South Korea held two more military exercises in the week, one in the East Sea and another in Gyeonggi Province, involving the Air Force and the Army.
Welcome back. We have two experts in the studio today to discuss the current situation on the Korean Peninsula. To my right is Professor Chae Gang. Professor Chae is the Director General for American Studies at the Institute of Foreign Affairs and National Security. It's good to see you again on the show, Professor
Good
Chae.
to be back.
And on my left is Professor Dennis Florik. Professor Florik is teaching at the Division of International Studies at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Thank you for joining us again.
Glad to be here.
Okay, let me start with you, Professor Chae.
Yes.
South Korean naval exercise took place in the waters near Yeonpyeong Island as scheduled. And many people are worrying that this exercise might escalate into a full-blown conflict on the Korean Peninsula because North Koreans pledged a massive retaliation. Actually, not only North Koreans, but also Chinese and Russians were saying that you need to cancel this exercise. But anyway, South Koreans pressed ahead and completed this exercise. So what was the significance of this naval drill that took place on Monday?
For the first, actually, we have to take into account this is a series of exercises which South Korea has been planning for the past 9 years. Annually, we have conducted 8 to 9 times of drill around that area. So that's a regular one. The other side, because this is one of the biggest live fire drill South Korea has conducted on the island, since this is just response to this Yeonpyeong shelling by North Korea. So it is necessary for South Korea to show its determination to respond sternly vis-à-vis North Korea's attempt. Of course, we were pretty much concerned with the possibility of escalation. Of course, that's why we fully mobilized the reconnaissance and surveillance systems over the islands and also over the DMZ areas. So we have actually kept in mind that's the possibility. But actually, we felt very necessary to show our determination and sternness vis-à-vis North Korea that actually we are not going to simply just become a target of North Korea's provocation. So it is a show of determination and willingness of South Korea. Of course, there was Chinese kinds of attempt to abort that drill, but actually it's our sovereign rights that was consented by the United States to stage the military exercise if feels necessary.
So it was more than anything else, it was to show our resolve, the resolve that we're not going to...
And also readiness to respond in kind whenever and wherever North Korea stage provocation vis-à-vis South Korea.
Well, what do you think, Professor Felica? Do you think it was necessary to hold this exercise when many people are worrying about the escalation of the situation?
I think we need to be very concerned that we don't get into a cycle of escalation and counter-escalation. The shelling of Yeonpyeong Island, from the North Korean point of view, was a reaction to a previous set of exercises which have been taking place in what North Korea claims as its territory, in disputed territory. The sinking of the Cheonan followed another clash in the West Sea, naval clash in the West Sea, where it was the North Koreans who had several casualties. So if you look at it from a broader historical perspective, you can see that there's been a ratcheting up step by step of tensions and military actions. So I think that's the context in which we need to view these exercises. They're over now, apparently, and we've passed through this phase of muscle flexing. I think now is the time to start thinking about diplomacy.
Okay, I see. As you mentioned previously,
yes.
this exercise has been taking place in our waters regularly for many years. But why does North Korea respond to this exercise so sensitively? I mean, last time we held this exercise, they shelled Yeonpyeong Island, and this time they even threatened nuclear retaliation. So what is their intention?
Actually, we can think of this the attempt to nullify the armistice agreements, which was signed by North Korea as well as the UNC. 1953. So by nullifying the NLL, actually nullifying the NLL is the kind of stepping stone to nullify NLL and also geared toward having dialogue with the United States. From our perspective, NLL was unilaterally drawn by the commander of United Nations Command in 1953 to control the South Korean ships and UN ships about their area. But North Korea recognized NLL for the past 50 years, of course. Nowadays, even if you look at the basic agreement of 1952 and also the other agreements made between South and North Korea, actually North Korea recognized de facto the line. Of course, we are going to negotiate the line, final line, when we get into the peace treaty, but actually we were not able to get into the talks or negotiation on the peace treaty. So actually North Korea tried to nullify the armistice agreements and also open up the dialogue channel with the United States by increasing the tension on the Korean Peninsula, and also try to drive a wedge between the United States and South Korea on that specific issue by raising up, internationalizing the NLL, Northern Limit Line, as a kind of disputed area. When I watch the BBC or CNN, they actually using the word disputed area. Actually, I don't think that's a disputed area.
But they are trying to nullify Northern Limit Line, and because they want to make the West Sea a place of disputes.
There's a disputed area, and then next day they will demand negotiation of the disputed area. So I think there's maybe three steps toward opening up the dialogue with the United States.
Getting back to the reaction of North Korea, Professor Florrick, they pledged massive retaliation, but they didn't retaliate. To the contrary, they made some sort of peace gesture after the exercise, saying that we might allow IAEA inspectors to come back to the Yeonpyeong nuclear site. So what should we make of this North Korean proposal, Professor Florrick?
First of all, I think you have to take seriously the North Koreans' feeling that these exercises do impinge on their security. They may have de facto recognized the Northern Limit Line, but they have not officially ever recognized the Northern Limit Line. They have always claimed a different line. So I think it's correct to describe this gray zone as a disputed area. Now, I think the single most important reason why North Korea didn't carry through with its threats of retaliation this time was Governor Richardson's visit to North Korea. I think that was very important in reassuring the North Koreans that these exercises were only exercises and not a preparation for a major attack against them. You have to understand that from the North Korean perspective, while in the South and in the United States, we really don't believe that another major conflict on the Korean Peninsula is possible, the entire North Korean state is founded on the idea that there is a very real threat coming from the United States and South Korea. And so I think that they've seen these exercises in a very different light than the way South Koreans and Americans have seen them. They've seen them as a direct threat. But the trip of Senator Richardson, I think, was very crucial in convincing them that a major attack against them was not imminent, and in fact that there's possibility for dialogue.
Professor Choi, but it seems to me that South Korean government officials are sort of downplaying the importance of North Korean proposal because they made this proposal to Governor Bill Richardson, but Governor Bill Richardson was not visiting North Korea as an official representative of the United States. So what do you think about this?
Okay, so actually Bill Richardson's visit to Pyongyang was pre-scheduled even before this naval drill exercise. So actually, it's quite, of course, they try to deliver a message to the Governor Richardson about their attempt to coming back to the Six-Party talks. They have been saying that they are returning to the Six-Party talks as a nuclear power state. That was totally unacceptable. So, of course, they are going to invite, they said, they are going to invite IAEA inspectors and ready to give up and 12,000 nuclear-free road. But that's not the deal we can accept because according to September 9th joint statements, actually they have to give up nuclear weapons, nuclear material, and all nuclear programs. That includes a uranium enrichment program. But actually they did not, this time, did not include an uranium enrichment program. On November 12th, North Korea rebuilt the uranium enrichment facility. That's a clear violation of September 19th joint statements. So actually they try to open up the new stage of nuclear game by having Bill Richardson over their territory and also show their intention to coming back to Six-Party talks. That's the way to drive a wedge between the United States and South Korea in handling this North Korea question. Now we have a series of North Korea questions. One is a conventional threat. The other one is a nuclear problem. So they try to decouple these two issues and focusing only on the nuclear dimension, which actually attracts U.S. attention very much. And about of course, Professor Florig said about the North Korean intention, but we have to think about who has brought this case. I mean, this Yeonpyeong shelling. Totally unexpected things. Of course, actually, if you take a look at this Yeonpyeong drill we staged on the 23rd of November, it was a regular exercise. The shelling was not directed toward North Korean territory. It was directed toward our own territorial waters. So actually, they used this opportunity to attract attention and divert attention from the Korean Peninsula to other way around. And also, we have to keep that in mind. Of course, I hope North Korea has, of course, have a clear understanding of the current situation, our clear intention. So the exercise was designed to enhance our deterrent posture, not offensive posture vis-a-vis North Korea.
Mm-hmm. But Professor Choi, if we can focus on the North Korean proposal to allow IAEA inspectors to return to Yeonpyeong nuclear sites, despite some skeptics, some optimists are saying that, well, North Korean proposal can be an important turning point in terms of resolving the current crisis situation in North Korea.
No, actually, I don't think so, because actually the biggest problem right now we have is not just revelation of a uranium enrichment program North Korea possesses. So there's a clear violation. Unless they say something about this uranium enrichment program, it is not possible. I don't think it's possible for the United States to accept this proposal at this stage. So actually, as I said, September 19th joint statement includes all nuclear programs. Mm-hmm. So if North Korea continues to enhance its capability in uranium enrichment program and also try to exclude that program on the from the negotiation table, mm-hmm. I don't think it's possible for the United States and for South Korea to accept this current North Korean proposal of having Six-Party talks, just having and as having the IAEA inspectors and as the sales of the fuel rod to outside export of fuel rod to outside the world. I don't think that's a possible condition for the United States to accept.
I see. If we can get back to North Korean future policies toward South Korea, they did not retaliate as they pledged it. So somehow they made this peace gesture toward South Korea. So can we say that North Koreans pretty much gave up on military provocation, at least for the time being? Or do you see any imminent threats coming from North Korea? What would be their intermediate policy towards South Korea?
Who knows? I mean, I don't think even the North Koreans know. Okay. But I do want to talk about the proposals that they made to Governor Richardson. Professor Che is absolutely right. They are inadequate for either South Korea or the United States to return to the Six-Party talks. The North Koreans have made much stronger commitments than simply to allow inspectors in the Yeonpyeong plant. They've made commitments to denuclearize, and they backed out of those commitments. So until the United States and South Korea see more serious actions on the part of North Korea, I don't think there's going to be much movement with regard to the six-party talks. However, I don't think that should rule out the possibility of having some kind of negotiations among several parties, whether it would be the six parties or whether it would be the United States, North Korea, and South Korea, or maybe with China also. 3, 4, 6, however many parties is not the important thing. The important thing is I think that the negotiations right now should be centered on the use of military forces and the maneuvering of military forces in the West Sea. Rather than the nuclear issue, because I think the nuclear issue is deadlocked.
Yes, I agree, because actually, for example, China proposed 3 steps toward opening up the six-party talks, like a trilateral talks, U.S., China, and North Korea. Then the head of the delegation talks, not plenary, and then after having a head of delegation talks, they can have the reconvening of the real plenary session of six-party talk. So I would not actually, Professor Flory already mentioned, I would not exclude the possibility of the dialogue, but actually, because both United States, South Korea, and also the Japan pledged that we need to solve this Cheonwon-ham and Yeonpyeong before we returning to the six-party talks. So actually, this is a more complicated issue. While we are having this confrontation and military tension rising on the Korean Peninsula, also focusing on the conventional the threats, and the other, like the nuclear dimension, has opened up in a new dimension. That's an uranium program. For the past 5 years, we have been focusing on the plutonium program only, but now actually the uranium program is getting more serious challenge for us.
I see. Professor Flory, if we can talk about the U.S. Response to North Korean proposal more, do you think the Americans are welcoming North Korean proposal? Actually, welcoming is not the right word here, so let me rephrase the question. Do you think the U.S. is somehow moving toward resumption of the six-party talk after the North Korean proposal that they would allow IAEA inspectors to Yeonpyeong?
Well, I think the United States is still in the position of what the Obama administration has called strategic patience, waiting for North Korea to not just signal, but to act in a way that convinces the United States that they are serious about negotiations. The Obama administration is certainly much more flexible than the Bush administration ever would have been in its hopes to deal with North Korea. But North Korea set off a nuclear test in the first few months of the Obama administration, and they put the Obama administration in a very difficult position. Now you have in the United States the Obama administration being badly wounded by the midterm elections. So I think the Obama administration is even less likely to go out on a limb until it gets something that it can take back to the U.S. Congress and say North Korea has really changed its ways.
I see.
Yes. Actually, he's quite right, actually. But the other chance we can think of, like actually in January, coming January, there will be a summit between President Obama and President Hu Jintao. I'm sure they will be discussing this issue seriously. But I think that I agree with Professor Flory about domestic situation in Washington. Isn't good for Obama administration to move or accept or just coming back to six-party talks. They have been saying we are not going to buy the same horse twice or 3 times. That's a stern position. Domestically, it is quite difficult for Obama administration to accept because once they accept, they have to admit the failure of their policy. But I don't think the Obama administration is in a position to go toward that direction. And also they are adding the other dimension, like a nuclear proliferation or nuclear cooperation between Iran and North Korea, North Korea and Syria. There is also the suspicion going on, North Korea and Myanmar. So actually the mood in Washington is not so good for the resumption of six-party talk unless North Korea does a clear action to show its intention to denuclearize or give up all its nuclear programs. Unless that's coming to the reality, I don't think the Obama administration to move ahead.
I see. I think we all agree that we don't know whether the six-party talk will resume, but let's say that it's going to resume. Then how do you think the talk should be conducted? I mean, what should be the major attention? I think you already touched upon this issue. But
yes.
Can you elaborate more on this?
I think that's first issue. Of course, there are 5 working groups within the six-party talks. So, of course, the primary group will be the denuclearization working group. So they will discuss how we are going to denuclearize this program. First of all, they have to freeze and shut down and freeze the facilities in Yeonpyeong, and then they have to accept IAEA inspectors. And also, before that, they have to declare all the existing nuclear programs and facilities they possess. Then we can talk about this one. So while we are having the talks on denuclearization, of course, the second group will be the most important group is like a normalization working group on U.S. DPRK relations. So they will be discussing about what the kinds of peace regime, nowadays they are not saying the peace treaty, nowadays they are saying the peace mechanism or peace regime on the Korean Peninsula. So I think the bilateral talks between the United States and DPRK will be the second most important working group. And along with that, maybe there's other ones like the peace treaty or peace mechanism on the Korean Peninsula. Actually, we agreed on that when there's substantial or meaningful progress in denuclearization process, we will convene the peace regime talks in a separate venue among the directly concerned parties. Maybe there's a possibility of having the four-party talks among U.S., Korea, North Korea, and China on this peace regime. So I think this is hypothetical situation, because once North Korea showed its intention to denuclearize all this Korean Peninsula by action, I don't think it's possible to have that talks. But once that happens, that's the scenario I can expect.
I see. But I hear a lot of North Korean experts saying in private that no matter what we do and no matter how many times we hold SixParty talks, there is no hope. I mean, North Koreans would never give up their nuclear weapons unless a change of regime takes place in North Korea. What do you think about this kind of analysis?
I think the North Koreans are becoming more and more comfortable with the idea that they have nuclear weapons. And they would like to have a de facto recognition that they are a nuclear power. On the other hand, I think it is still possible to go back to the original bargain of the agreed framework, the deal that was made in the Six-Party talks, which is basically North Korea giving up its nuclear ambitions in return for real security and the end of hostile relations with the United States. And this is where I think the United States has to really seriously re-examine its position. I don't think that in the Clinton administration, and certainly not in the Bush administration, that there ever was a serious intention to normalize relations with North Korea. Now that North Korea is a nuclear state of some kind, I don't think there's any reason to expect them to give up their #1 bargaining chip unless they see progress on their #1 demand, which is the end of the hostile policy. And what we've seen in the last few months is anything but the end of the hostile policy. It's simply, what we've seen in the last few months simply reconfirms to the North Koreans that despite 15 years of negotiations, they're in no better position than when the negotiations started.
Well, Professor Choi, any final thoughts on how we should proceed from here?
Of course, actually, first of all, we have to maintain the high level of awareness vis-a-vis North Korea. Of course, we like to have a double track or two-track approach, dialogue and pressure. I think this is time for us to think about more security for the time being. Unfortunately, of course, I would not just exclude the possibility of having another round of talks on the SixParty. But actually, there must be a kind of North Korea's strategic decision to give up nuclear weapons. To make that happen, I think at this time we have to maintain the clear coordination and cooperation among the directly concerned parties. Also, we should more focus on the security aspect of the situation.
Well, gentlemen, this is how we're going to wrap up today's discussion. Thank you very much for your productive discussion today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
As the year 2010 is drawing to a close, the North Korean question remains still very much unanswered. In this situation of high tension and volatility, the only option for South Korea is to keep up its watch over North Korea and prepare for all eventualities. This has been Kim Jae-chun for InFocus. Thank you for watching us.